Hand me a book, please. Thank you. Chapter 10, Tanya. Talking about Sadiqim. Complete Sadiqim and not yet complete Sadiqim. Just to refer back to a question that was asked last week about a very deep question, very good question. What's the difference between quantity and quality? Good question. And appreciating the greatness of the Almighty. So quantity we know is how much. How much money did you give to Tzedakah? How much money did you spend on your mitzvah? Did you learn Tanya? How many times did you do a favor for somebody else? Did you do one today? That's quantity. How much? How many? What's quality? Quality is texture. Quality is feeling. You can buy a garment of silk, very fine texture, very pleasant, or linen, fine linen, or you can buy an ordinary garment, cotton, or a rough garment of burlap. That's the quality of the thing. So we can do mitzvahs in a rough way without too much consideration, or we can do mitzvahs in a fine way and we bring a lot of feeling and preparation to it. That's quality. Studying, feelings of love and awe, fear, respect in doing the mitzvah, desire to extend our love, to express love for others with the mitzvah. It says in the Talmud, if a person tzedakah, you automatically get 6 blessings. And it brings a verse in the Torah to prove it. It mentions 6 things, 6 perks to the person who gives charity. But if you smile at the person and inquire about their family and their welfare, and you make them feel that you care about them, then it's 11 brachas. So you see the eiches, the quality makes a difference. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the subject in hand in chapter 10, which is what is the difference between a tzaddik who's a complete, total tzaddik, and of those we learned from very rare. We don't have many of these in the world.
Why is this included in
But
this
there always has to be one. What?
Why is this included in this book?
What?
Why are they including like Sadiqim in this book?
Why are they in this book?
Yeah.
Well, we have to know about it. That's why. Because it's to tell you that it's not impossible. Nothing is impossible. And free choice is never taken away. And since it's there, the Alter Rebbe, we answered this yesterday also. It's a good question. Why does the Rebbe write about something that's way beyond us? First of all, we have to know that there's a general teaching of the sages. Yogaita umatzasa tamin, if a person tries very hard. Yogaita v'lei matzasa al tamin. If a person says, I tried to be righteous, I couldn't do it. We don't have to believe him. It means you didn't try hard enough. You gave up. Lo yogaiti umatzasa, a person says, yeah, I didn't even bother trying, but I made it. I'm righteous. We don't believe him either. Because it doesn't come without trying. But if a person says, Yogaiti, umatsasi, I tried hard to get up on time for class, and I did it. We believe you. And the proof is you're there. So similarly, a person, the fact that we know there is such a thing as a tzaddik gomer, we don't know who's who. We never know who's who. Maybe you are either the righteous person that's holding up the whole congregation, the Jew, the whole world is on your spiritual shoulders, and you don't even know it. You think you're of no significance in the big picture. No extraordinary significance, at least, put it that way. Another explanation of it is, we said yesterday that the Alter Rebbe says, it says in the plural, let the righteous in the plural rejoice in Hashem. And it says, why is it in the plural? And he says there, because it's a righteous tzaddik, a person who is a tzaddik, will become connected to you. So you'll become, as it were, impregnated with the neshama of some righteous tzaddik as a gift from heaven, and then you'll have a double-barreled neshama, your own, and the neshama of this righteous person who's connected with you and inspiring you and giving you strength and koyach to serve Hashem. You could be a tzaddik. And then the Alter Rebbe says a third point is maybe, who knows? Maybe you'll get there. So that's why it's there. And the fourth reason is because we have to know that it's there. We have to know that there is such a thing as a great righteous person in every generation. There's a Shimon, there's a Moshe Rabbeinu, and there's a Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and there's Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, and there's a Rambam, and there are far and few between, but they're there. Because about Joseph, it says Yosef is the first person in the Torah called a tzaddik. Yosef had tzaddik, the righteous one, Yosef, and he's called a tzaddik. We learn from him that the whole world stands on the shoulders of the tzaddik. Where do we see that? There was famine in the world. Everybody was starving. The whole world was starving. The whole world. And Yosef fed everybody. He prepared. He was the only one prepared. And he prepared enough to feed the whole world. Noach was great. Noach was a great person. He fed the whole world, because the whole world included himself, his 3 sons, and the 4 wives between them, and all the animals. He fed them for a whole year. A whole year. But Yosef was greater. He fed the world for 2 years until the famine was over. What made the famine be over? Yaakov came down to Egypt. And when he came down to Egypt, the Seder, the order is, you greet a king. And so Yosef took his father Yaakov to greet Pharaoh, and he gave him a blessing. What was his blessing? That the waters of the Nile should greet you. And so every time Pharaoh would go to take a bath, to take a dip in the Nile, the waters would rise to greet him. It never rains in Egypt. So what do? They have irrigation ditches from the Nile to all the fields. And so every time Pharaoh would go to the Nile for his daily dip, the water would rise and flood the irrigation canals. And all the fields would have water when the whole world was dying of thirst, of famine, and became very rich. Sort of like America. So these things show us that the world stands in the merit of the righteous. And we have to know that because a person should never allow his success to go to his head and think, I did it. I studied and I applied myself and I worked hard and I was smart and by gosh, I became rich. That's not what it's all about. Bless you with success. One person, maybe he was and you do kindness, you're doing God's work, and he doesn't remain indebted. He pays his debts. So we have to know that our success, emotionally, spiritually, in our family, in our business, in our relationships, It's because the tzaddik is giving us a blessing. The tzaddik of the generation, just like Yosef, fed the whole world. The tzaddik of the generation gives bracha to the whole world. So that's what we have to learn at Malka Levana. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
At length? In detail? Gave you 4 answers. Okay. It's a good question. It's a very good question. Somebody sent me a note after the class yesterday, and he pulled me up on this point as well. And he says, what about today? Of the community. And I asked him, what are we doing here? Why are we still here? And he said, I have the same question. Obviously, the answer is to be found in the teachings of the Rebbe. The previous Rebbe, he is the one. The previous Rebbe is the one of our generation who fills that bill. So if he passed on in 1950, what are we doing here? When the Tzemach Tzedek passed on, there was a certain chassid who was so distraught. He went to the base of Medrash and he broke all the windows and he said, what are you people doing here? If the soul of the generation is gone, what are you doing here? And then he went to the cemetery, to the base of Achar, until he passed out. And then he came back. When he came back, he said, oh, okay, it's all right. I guess I'll have to pay for the windows. But the Rebbe, he didn't leave, and his youngest son is the Rebbe. His youngest son is in his place. And that's the fifth Rebbe, Rebbe Maharash, Rebbe Shmuel, youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek. And the same thing happened in 1950 when the previous Rebbe passed away. Passed away. Did he really pass away? The Rebbe objected to anybody even saying that. He didn't like people to say his memory should be a blessing. He said, what do we need his memory for? He's still here. And he went on to say this, Malka. Our Rebbe said about the passing of his father-in-law, who he considered and said over and over again, who was the leader of our generation. He said, nothing changed. There was a generous donor who supported Lubavitch's work in Chicago, and he didn't know what to do, and he asked the shaliach there, I want to give money, but what am I giving money to? And they wrote the Rebbe, or they called the Rebbe and said, what do we answer? And the Rebbe said, you tell him it's the same neshama in a different body. And the Rebbe also said in one of these Verbrengens of 1950, when he first became Rebbe, when he wasn't even accepting the title yet, he said, the only difference between now and before is that before, when the Rebbe was sitting in his room, you could go in and see him there, problem, he would answer you. And if you didn't tell him, he didn't have to know. Or if you didn't tell him everything, he didn't have to know. So you fooled yourself. You thought he didn't know. Of course he knew. And now the only difference is that you can't fool yourself. You can't think that you didn't tell him or you didn't write him. And he knows the truth. And that's what's really behind all these people who go around saying, nothing changed. The Rebbe is still the Rebbe. And he gave us plenty to do, plenty of instructions of what we should be doing. Okay, chapter 10. When a person struggles with his negative, another story. I'm going to tell it again briefly. The Alter Rebbe had a chassid who asked him, what do I do about the improper thoughts that throng into my mind and I don't? I said, go consult with so-and-so, he'll teach you what to do. And he got there, probably take a taxi or another. He had to go on foot, and it was inclement. It was raining and cold when he arrived, and he knocked on the door. And the guy opened the window and said, who's there? He says, it's your chassid so-and-so from the Alter Rebbe. Oh, wonderful. Closed the window and didn't open the door. And this happened a few times. And it's cold and it's rainy. And finally, he lets him in. He gives him some tea and some biscuits, and he dries him off. And he moves in. He participates in the daily order of service of this chassid. He eats with him. He goes to shul with him. He davens with him. He doesn't go to work with him. Maybe he stayed in the house and learned during the day. And eventually, he got depressed. He's not teaching him anything. And the chassid says to him, why you look depressed today? Why is today different? He said, well, I came here for a reason. And I don't seem to be fulfilling it. He said, what's the reason? So he told him, I came here, the Rebbe said, I should come here, you would teach me how to control improper thoughts when I want to daven and when I want to, during the day. He said, that's your problem. I taught you that the moment you arrived. You did? He said, what exactly did you do? He said, well, it was raining, it was cold, and I knocked and you opened the window and he said, who's there? And I told you, and you closed the window and you left me outside. He says, that was the lesson. It was. You let in who you want, when you want. You don't want to have improper thoughts, don't let them in. Now you're going to ask me a question, Malka Levana. The problem is they come when I don't want. I didn't let them in. The answer is yes, you did. You let them in once, and once now they know the way, like the mouse in the kitchen. He knows where to go. You opened the door in the first place. Okay, well, how do I get him out? You drive him out. And when he comes back, you push him out. You sweep over the place. You keep it clean. So the Alter Rebbe uses the expression, you push the thought away with two hands. As soon as you recognize that this thought is improper, you push it away with two hands. But when I was young, I went to movies, I saw things, I read things, and every now and then I remember them. But that's your struggle. Everybody has a struggle. Nobody gave you a guarantee that it was going to be easy. Nobody signed a contract with you. You're going to come to Machon Chama and your life is going to become easy. Maybe just the opposite. You're going to become much more aware of what your life is. All right. So, page 151, we have a commandment in the Torah not to allow idol worship in our cities. The Alter Rebbe says, this is a symbol of driving out any vestige of evil in the left side of your heart. And if there still is anything left, that means you're not a complete Sadiq. When anything left, like if you take your garment to the cleaners and they clean it, and there's no more dirt in the garment, there's no more cholent left on your blouse, but there's a little stain. So we have to, you could be a tzaddik with the clean garments, but they're not 100%. You're not 100% yet. So that's the tzaddik, she'eina gomer, the tzaddik who is not complete. Obviously, there are many variables here as to the nature and the quantity. the quality and the quantity, like we just defined them, the quality and the quantity of the undesirable in the thing, the influence that's in the heart. That's completely eradicated. So you still work, you can't have to keep working at it. And that's the difference between the complete Sadiq and the incomplete Sadiq. Give me an example. The Rebbetzin, story about the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushkin. During wartime, there was they fled to the south of France. It was dangerous, and a German airplane flew over and was shooting at people with machine guns attached to the plane. He's shooting, and people ran for cover. And the sirens were, warning sirens were sounding, and people ran for shelter. And there was an elderly man who was deaf. He didn't hear the sirens. And the Rebbetzin yelled to him, "Get down, get down." And he didn't hear her. And she pushed him down for his safety. So she told somebody that years later, she still had regret that she pushed him down. Even though it was to save his life.